there are a lot of ways to farm, a lot of methods, a lot of books about it. And when I started farming, we kind of I developed a lot of the methods we used in a bubble, which may not be the best idea, right? Because it takes a lot longer to figure things out. But it's just how I did it. And so there's a lot of methods we don't use that I get asked about a lot. There's certainly things I've tried or looked at, but they just don't work for me that well. Um, One of them is tarping. Well, it's got big in the last few years. For me, it's really inefficient to have to carry around tarps because what comes with tarps is heavy rocks, right? You can't do that without having a lot of heavy rocks and moving a lot of heavy rocks to weigh all this stuff down. Something has to be heavy to weight it. The other problem is you're only putting a pause button on things, which means if you're using it as weed control, then you only have 3, 4 weeks, you're putting it down. So it's really only taking care of whatever's going to happen during that time. It doesn't future-proof anything. It just doesn't really work that way. So for me, I'd much rather, walk around with a flame roller on wheels, because it's nice and easy. You just walk around and it seems to me a lot easier. I can get to know what's going on, see if there are flushes of weeds before I plant. It's going to work just as well, and it's a lot easier. And that's really the key. It's just so much easier, especially you get tarps filled with water. It's a big nightmare for me. Another thing we don't use is plastic mulch or putting in landscape fabric. I think our first year we did it in a few places because we're just really paranoid about weeds, but I personally didn't like it. I don't like the smell when things are rotting on top of it. I don't like the management of it. I feel it's just takes a lot of time to manage it. I think it makes it makes a lot of sense on a really big farm. You roll it out with a tractor. You're covering large areas with it without a lot of labor. But on a small farm like mine, I don't need it. It's just too much labor to put it in. It's time consuming. And I don't really like the aesthetics of it for me on my farm. I'd rather just not have it and put in good cultivation practices. So I get asked about that. I get asked about spreadsheets. Spreadsheets is something I abandoned long ago because I find them to be very cumbersome. Some farmers will use very complicated spreadsheets that I just don't find that useful. I have pared my spreadsheets down to what is essential. I feel that, if it takes a really long time to explain a process, then it's probably just too complicated. And, I use a lot of field walks and looking at what's going on and making decisions through the season than doing all of this planning with a spreadsheet and the spreadsheet telling me what to do. Although I do have a plan, I pared it down so much that it's simple. And that's kind of how I think about how I do farming is I'm stripping away a lot of the complexities. I'm removing the steps. I feel like a 10-step process has probably 7 or 8 too many steps. And that relates to using the no-till methods. It was about removing steps, right? And going and getting the BCS just seemed like an unnecessary step for me. And I do that with a lot of the things I'm doing. Just like in spreadsheets, if I'm not using parts of it, I'm removing it and removing it and removing it because I find it unnecessary. I want it to be simple, so simple that I can laminate it to one page and show it to a worker, and within a couple of minutes they get it and they understand exactly what's going on. That I don't need to go and change it all the time and have, long discussions to explain to workers what needs to go on. And so those are just some of the practices that we've removed from here. It doesn't mean there's anything wrong with them, or I just get a lot of questions about them, and I just, I never use them. And I thought it might be important to say why I don't use them and what are those practices. Those are just some of them.